What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and in this video I want to explore why I love Dark Souls 3 and look at it from a critical perspective, much like I did with Dark Souls 2 in one of my previous videos. And before I begin, if you like the video, consider subscribing and sharing it to give my life meaning, and hit the bell to be notified of future uploads. And with that out of the way, let's begin talking about the finale to one of modern gaming's most influential series. This is Dark Souls 3. Before I dive into the depths, it's important to first understand what exactly Dark Souls 3 was designed to become first. The game was directed by series creator Hidetaka Miyazaki, who was largely absent during the development of Dark Souls 2 because he was deep into development on Bloodborne. According to Miyazaki, he was inspired to return to the Souls series after working on Bloodborne due to what he called limitations when developing it. Miyazaki also was surprised people even liked his work and never even thought his Souls subgenre of games would even make it past the original Demon Souls. But here he was, developing the finale to a beloved series he originally thought no one would care about. The theme of Dark Souls 3 was categorized as withered beauty, and this would reflect in the art direction of the game, which would depict a dying world that was ready to transition into its next true age. According to Miyazaki, Dark Souls 3 should not be seen as the finale to the Dark Souls series as a whole either, but instead that the series would continue at some point. He called Dark Souls 3 a turning point for both From Software as a studio and the company at large. Whether this turning point meant the eventual creation of Elden Ring being its spiritual successor, since both the Dark Souls series and Elden Ring both share many similarities, not to mention they're both licensed and published by Bandai Namco, I can't really say. Or maybe in the future there could eventually be a Dark Souls 4, now wouldn't that be something? There's far too much lore and interesting things in this universe to not return to at some point in my opinion. But for the sake of this analysis, I will be treating Dark Souls 3 primarily as a finale to a series. So now, it's time to dive deep and explore this world. Dark Souls 3 takes place during the end of everything. It's a story that both thematically and visually represents a world exhausted of all of its energy and life. An era where what remains clings helplessly to a dying world that has long turned its back on those who are just trying to survive. You play as the Ashen One, who is my personal favorite character archetype within the Dark Souls series. You're not meant to necessarily save this land, as from the beginning of the game it's clear that the world is in its death throes. Your actual mission, in my opinion anyways, is to help the world accept its end and embrace what comes next. Everything, as far as the eye can see, is ash and dust, and the game's world depicts kingdoms built upon the mass graves and architecture of previous long-forgotten eras. What I love about Dark Souls 3 is that it shows a world where the end is inevitable, where there is no magic solution to the problem, no hope to restore what once was. And that's why it's so incredible to not only play but witness as a series finale. Because much like the world, the players like you or me don't really want Dark Souls to end. We journey through its dying world hoping to find anything that could reverse the end of life. But by the end of the game, even if you choose to link the fire, it doesn't return to its former glory but merely flickers, only to die out. I think this is because Miyazaki wanted this game to act not only as a finale but somewhat of a farewell. He wanted this to be an experience where by the end of it you could accept that there is simply nothing you can do to keep this particular world, this particular series going. We are simply journeying through an empire of ash built upon the ghosts of yesterday's hope, and we are not meant to travel far. When it comes to level design, I would say Dark Souls 3 is a lot of meat with very little fat on the bone. And this is a very good thing because while the game is by no means small, it is smaller than Dark Souls 2 in overall scope. Instead of focusing on quantity, Dark Souls 3 is all about quality. In my Dark Souls 2 essay video, I complained about how that game felt very disconnected and the world didn't make a whole lot of sense when it came to how it all flowed together. It made the world feel more like random game levels than an actual breathing world that made sense. Dark Souls 3, however, doesn't have this problem. In fact, I would say its world is easily the most well realized out of the entire series. From the very beginning of the game to its end and even its DLCs, everything feels purposeful and actually physically exists within the larger game world. I love how when you enter the world proper, you can physically see Lothric Castle all the way from the Undead Settlement or even Irithyll Valley. I love how the woods connect to the cathedral and Faron Keep, and how you enter the catacombs only to emerge physically through it into the beauty of Irithyll. Everything feels purposeful and makes sense, and I can't express how much I love this. One of my favorite levels in the game is the Undead Settlement, because not only is it one of the bigger levels, but it has lots of layers to it, and you can find all kinds of crazy secrets all over it if you explore. This sense of discovery makes Dark Souls 3's level design layout extremely fun and rewarding to explore, and it fulfills that desire of wanting to desperately know what's lurking behind the next corner. The only somewhat blemish, I guess, would maybe be the swamp area around Faron Keep. This is mostly because your movement is hindered and you continuously build up poison, yet the enemies can freely move through the swamp without issue. It's not terrible, but it's not great either, but it's still better than Blighttown in my opinion. However, besides that one swamp area, there really isn't any level I dread going through in New Game Plus. Well, maybe Irithyll Dungeon is a little annoying because of those jailer dudes, but they're not that bad. The game also has this beautiful level of scope to its world, with places like the Profaned Capital or Archdragon Peak just being really beautiful to look at and explore. And while the game does feel fairly linear compared to the original Dark Souls, I don't really see that as a negative. Dark Souls 3, in my opinion, is one of the most replayable games in the series because of its level design. And I think that this style of game design is still far more interesting to explore than pretty much any open world game to this date, including Elden Ring. Lothric Castle in its entirety is an amazing level. I love everything about that place. From the very first time you enter it, and even much later on when you go to face the princes, that entire level is amazing. And I haven't even started talking about the DLC, but that's because I want to dedicate a chapter of its own to just that later on. Finally, to close out this section, I want to go over a few quality of life improvements here that are really great. Firstly would be the new skills on each weapon, which helps personalize and incentivize you into actually using different weapons. Although it is limited due to not being able to change arts on weapons, which Elden Ring would eventually do, but for what it is when it came out, it's still great. I also love how when you finish certain encounters, it'll replenish your Estus flasks, another change I'm glad Elden Ring adopted as well, and I complained that in Dark Souls 2, the weapon durability mechanic there was garbage, and it is. Thankfully, in Dark Souls 3, while you do have weapon durability, your weapons are way more sturdy. So much so that I actually never even used one repair powder in my recent playthrough and a half. Like, not even once ever. My weapons never degraded past maybe 90% if that, which kind of shows that this mechanic is largely pointless, and thankfully, again, Elden Ring just removed it outright. Also, weirdly enough, Dark Souls 3 removes being able to upgrade your armor, which Elden Ring also inherited. I'm not sure how I feel about this because I actually liked upgrading certain sets that I wore in previous games. Honestly, in the future, I would love to be able to socket in buffs or resistances into my armor, like something out of Final Fantasy VII with their materia system in the future. I don't know, I think that would be cool, something like the blood gems in Bloodborne, but for your armor basically. I think that would be a solid middle ground. But I guess if that's one of the only somewhat negative changes, I don't have too much to complain about. I also love that you don't need to light a torch, you can just have one on your offhand and swap it in when you need light, which is another really good change. I also love that you can allocate your Estus flasks to heal health or mana, and I really loved Firelink Shrine. Besides maybe Majula, this is my other favorite safe zone in the series. I like that you can talk to various NPCs and then they just teleport back to the shrine for easy access instead of having to venture outside to talk to them. Although I'm still not crazy about having to travel back to Firelink in order to level up, which they didn't have in the original Dark Souls, but in Dark Souls 2 you had to go back to Majula as well. But this was changed in Elden Ring and Sekiro, which is good, but at the very least Dark Souls 3's load times are pretty good, so it's not that painful anyway. I also enjoyed the various NPC side quests, but I don't really want to get too much into them in case you want to explore them for yourself. But I do like the one in particular where you can actually get married. But this is Dark Souls after all, so even getting married isn't exactly, well, let's just say there won't be a honeymoon. But overall, I love most of the changes that Dark Souls 3 brought, while still a little annoyed of some decisions it kept from Dark Souls 2, but now let's talk about one of the biggest draws of this game. I think it's safe to say that Dark Souls 3 has one of the best lineups of bosses in the series, and to a further extent all of From Software's games. I would say one of the only games that comes close to rivaling this would be maybe Sekiro. But like I said earlier about Dark Souls 3 being all meat, no fat on the bone, the bosses exemplify this perfectly. Every single boss in Dark Souls 3, apart from maybe 2, are outstanding in my opinion. The only bosses I would say that aren't up to the quality of the others would firstly be the Deacons of the Deep. This is because they're just a horde of priest dudes standing around like they're waiting for a rock concert to start. Although not nearly as bad as say the Royal Rat Vanguard in Dark Souls 2, or the Royal Rat Authority, or the dual Dragon Rider fight, the Deacons at the very least require you to be alert and watch where the red essence goes so you can continue hurting the boss. It's not rocket science or anything, but at least it's better than smack the rats till they die, even though apparently, according to my comments in my Dark Souls 2 video, the boss rat in that game has a mohawk, and that's how you know? And how the hell am I supposed to see a mohawk on a rat in a sea of rodents biting at my shins? I just slash and pray for the best when it comes to these games. But anyway, besides Deacons, my only other slight complaint would maybe be Cursed Rotted Greatwood, mostly because you can't lock onto the arm, which makes it really awkward to hit, but maybe there's a trick to it and I'm just an idiot. It is kind of weird that you pop these pimple-like things on the Greatwood, and I guess that does make the boss vulnerable, but it's still weird you can't just lock onto its arm. I also enjoy that there isn't a lot of bosses that later become normal enemies like in the previous 2 games. Like, don't get me wrong, there still is. The old Demon King boss, for example, has the same sort of model used at least 2 more times in the game, once in the cathedral and another in the settlement. And there's also another one that shows up in a DLC later on that I'll talk about later. And I also just wanted to add that every From Software game needs a mode that just lets me fight bosses whenever I want. Sekiro has this. I wish Dark Souls 3 had it as well, cause that would have been dope. But moving on, besides these minor gripes, this game's entire boss lineup is impressive as hell. Eudix Gundyr is a great starting fight, and I love how that fight has a surprise with what looks like the Venom symbiote from Spider-Man bursting out of Gundyr like a xenomorph in Ridley Scott's Alien. Then we have the first boss in the proper game outside of Firelink in the form of Vort, who's also a solid fight. Vort teaches players that their roles have invincibility frames, and the added mechanic of becoming frostbitten when being hit is a solid punishment to further stress just how important dodge rolling is in this game. Even though Vort does these things, it's not a hard fight, just roll and spank his booty until he dies like tradition demands in these games. While there's a lot of fights to cover, I would really like to focus on the actual Lords of Cinder because I think these fights in particular are great. The Abyss Watchers are awesome. This is a boss I shouldn't like due to its first phase putting multiple enemies against you, but they sidestep this by not making every enemy alert at once, but gradually over time, which gives you the opportunity to keep the fight in your favor if you're skilled enough. Then the second phase happens and this boss just becomes awesome. The delayed fire damage mechanic where you need to be aware of not only where the Watcher slashes, but where it ends up is a really cool mechanic. It's not only that, but the way the fire looks is just badass, but maybe I'm just a sucker for flashy stuff. I also love the lore behind the Watchers being disciples of Artorias and how they are so hell-bent on holding back the Abyss that they will destroy entire kingdoms and kill all of their citizens if even a hint of the Abyss is found there. And this cruel joke that this undying duty to combat the Abyss ends up corrupting the very Watchers themselves, which leads to them all fighting each other, is both crazy and poetic. The sad result that all those people the Watchers killed to protect humanity would inevitably corrupt the very force sworn to defeat it is poetic irony and perfectly wraps up the Abyss Watchers and Artorias' story. I love this fight, it's great. The only Cinder fight I'm not super crazy about would be Yhorm. Again, the spectacle of his attacks are awesome, but I've never been crazy about needing to use a certain weapon for a boss fight. Mostly because this makes a fight only winnable really in one particular way, which pushes the player's actual build to the side in favor of a specific solution. But the Storm Ruler attacks are dope, and it's satisfying as hell to watch Yhorm's health bar chunk with each hit. It's by no means a bad fight, I just, would have liked to fight him on my terms is all. Then we have Aldrich, which is such a cool boss not only in terms of attacks, but lore as well. Aldrich is the devourer of gods, and seeing him wearing the corpse of Dark Sun Gwyndolin while also having what seems to be Gravelord Nito-like attire on him is really cool. Not to mention that we're fighting Aldrich in the literal same room where Ornstein and Smough once stood as well. Such a cool fight. The teleporting is a little bit annoying, but it's predictable, so it's not too bad. It's just a really cool fight in general. Then we have one of the best fights in the game in the form of the Twin Princes. I love this fight so much. It's weird because I shouldn't like it as much as I do because it has teleporting and a resurrection mechanic where you need to kill Prince Lothric to end the fight instead of Lorien, but man, it's so good. The music is great and the entire fight is just so much fun to play around with. I also love the arena and the build up to the fight as well. And the lore behind this fight is great, with Prince Lothric being born to be the supposed savior of the land and his elder brother Lorien protecting him, even if it cost him his own health to do so. And the whole legend of how Lorien single-handedly defeated the Demon Prince in the past is just cool. I love this fight to bits. If the Twin Princes were in any other game, they'd be a 10 out of 10 fight, but they aren't my favorite fight in Dark Souls 3 by a long shot. And that's not a knock towards the Twin Prince fight, it's just that there are so many more fights that are, in my opinion, even better than that one, that it just speaks to the quality of this game. One of the best fights in the game, and really all of From Software games, would have to be the Nameless King. In the original release, the King was considered the hardest boss in the game by the community, and his arena, along with the build-up of 3 games to his eventual reveal, paid off with it being one of the greatest fights in the series. The craziest part of this fight was realizing that this Nameless King was none other than the long-forgotten son of the god of sunlight himself, Gwyn, the final boss of the original Dark Souls. I don't want to spend too much time on the King here since I do want to explore his fight in a potential future video, but I will say when it comes to boss fights, this is one of the standouts in a game full of great bosses. Then there's the Ancient Dragon fight, and a lot of people think it's bad, and in all honesty, I don't even consider this a boss fight. You don't actually fight the dragon. While I understand the disappointment when it comes to this, I just don't consider it a boss. Sure, it has a health bar, but it dies in one hit. But whatever, there's not much really to say about it. One fight I don't think gets enough love is Osiris, as he's not only a boss I enjoy fighting, but his OST is one of my favorites in the game as well. He also never shuts up, almost constantly ranting about something during the fight, but I love this guy. Hopefully his invisible child Ocelot survives somehow, and we see it fully grown in some potential future game, so I can kill it. I said what I said. Then of course there's my favorite boss fight in the form of the Soul of Cinder. I've already done an entire video on this fight, but to keep it short, it's the perfect fight to end the series with in my opinion. Having the boss be the manifestation of all the players who've linked the fire in previous games coming together to form the final fight is genius. It's an amazing fight and a fitting end to Dark Souls 3 in my opinion. There's also other bosses I like to shout out for also being great, like the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, who has this elegant fighting style that is both ethereal yet devastating if you get hit. While not a difficult fight by any means, it is still a great addition. And the same can be said for Pontiff Sullivan, who in my opinion, quality-wise, Sullivan could have easily have been a Lord of Cinderfight himself, cause his fight is just that good, and I'm actually surprised he's not one of the lords. His shadow form mirroring his attacks is amazing, the arena is great, and so is his music. It's a boss fight done right to every detail. I never tire of fighting this guy, and the last fight for the base game I want to point out is Champion Gundyr, which is an optional boss found behind Osiris's boss arena via a hidden wall. What I love about Champion Gundyr's fight is, besides the fact it's an upgraded version of Udex Gundyr, is that technically speaking, we are no longer in our own dimension or time period at this point fighting this version of Gundyr. I mean, I could be wrong, of course let me know in the comments if I am, but I always found this dark version of Firelink Shrine to be us as the player stepping into a separate dimension. Almost as if we crossed into some multiversal-like adjacent world where the Age of Dark was actualized. And Champion Gundyr was the Ashen One-like person who caused this age to happen, which opens all kinds of cans of worms when I start thinking about how Dark Souls as a series could wrestle concepts like mirror dimensions and alternate multiverses, and how gateways to these other realms could be hidden across the world without even the knowledge of those who live there. But it is terrifying to think that while you're here, you're literally in a world where light just doesn't really exist anymore. The fire has faded completely, and the people left behind in this nightmare dimension are forced to live in eternal darkness as they wait for their deaths and the eventual end of their age. Really haunting stuff, but really cool too. Honestly, I'd love to explore that sort of age within the confines of a game myself, or even a DLC or something. Oh yeah, but I rambled, my bad. The Champion Gundyr fight is great. I like how he can kick you, it's cool, but yeah, I really like the dark mirror dimension we're left in here. Makes me wonder if every player out there playing one of these games, in a way, their playthrough is its own dimension or something. Like, in my dimension, I may give rise to the Hollows of Londor, while another may try to link the fire or usher in an Age of Dark. Yet they all exist parallel to one another, each choice and world distinct yet equally as important as the infinite amounts surrounding it. And somewhere out there, one of those worlds could lead to something new, and speaking of new worlds, we first need to speak of the end. And now I want to explore and speak about the DLCs of Dark Souls 3, which I find, in my opinion, to be some of the best, if not the greatest DLC expansions From Software has made for their games up until this point. In my opinion, these DLCs rival or even surpass that of the old Hunters in Bloodborne. Might be a hot take, but I'll stand by it. Firstly, we have Ashes of Ariandel, which immediately reminds me of Elohm Lois in Dark Souls 2, and I am still pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure. The first DLC takes the Ashen One within the painted world of Ariandel, and I love how the man who transports us here is none other than Gale, who I'll get to later. This DLC, while not as good as the expansion that follows it, still showcases a world full of mystery and chaos just asking to be explored. I love the giant wolf enemies, they gave me Sith vibes. I also love and hate the giant Millwood Viking enemies, as they're strong as hell and shrug off almost any attack like it's nothing, and that big tower with the bow guy sucks. I also love the grotesque rot-like creatures that have seemed to infest the village and its surroundings. And this underlying feeling that there is a profound sickness woven into this land. And discovering what that sickness was is easily one of the best parts of Dark Souls 3 in its entirety. And that sickness turns out to be none other than the nun-like woman named Sister Frieda. In my opinion, Frida's boss fight is absolutely one of the hardest fights in From Software history. And not only is she one of the hardest, but she's also one of the best fights mechanically too. She's one of the only bosses From Software has ever made that has not one but 3 phases to her fight. I love how she holds her scythe, I love how she can disappear, and if you don't listen for her footsteps, she can punish you instantly. And I love how when you beat her, the second phase starts and it's like one of the coolest cutscenes in the game by far. Now you're fighting Frida and the father, and in my opinion, when it comes to dual boss fights, this is probably my favorite dual boss fight and is right up there with Ornstein and Smough. Having the deadly assassin-like attacks of Frida alongside the sluggish but devastating attacks of the father, it works perfectly in my opinion. And then you beat this phase, and I honestly thought originally that was it was over. Until Frida emerges, now called Black Flame Frida, and my first attempt in this run to fight her was laughably inept. She wiped the floor with me so badly that I legitimately couldn't even get a single hit on her at all. Like, just look at how badly she's destroying me. I haven't been this embarrassed by a video game boss in like forever. Black Flame Frida wiped the literal floor with me quite a few times, and this form of Frida is, in my opinion, the hardest boss in the entire Dark Souls series. She is so devastatingly strong, fast, and powerful that she has to be the inspiration for future fights like Millennia. But eventually I overcame her and was ready to enter what I consider to be the greatest DLC From Software has ever made. It's time to enter the Ring City. This entire DLC is profound. Not only does it manage to act as the perfect epilogue to the entire series, but it features some of the greatest boss fights in the series as well, in my opinion. The sheer scope and size of the Ring City is incredible. It's this hidden city tucked away within the ruins of all civilization, and you as the Ashen One descend this insanely huge expansion in order to discover what lies at the end of the world. And there's some really crazy moments too, like the weird dark lurker like angels who constantly pester you with attacks from afar as you run from cover to cover, to even a bridge where a giant summons mystic archers that just snipe you to death. And in terms of actual art and level design, I think the Ring City is easily the best level in the entirety of Dark Souls 3. It has this ancient Babylon look to it, like it's this city that was never meant to be found by the world. There's also some really crazy enemy designs, and I love the new weapons included with this DLC as well. It does have some weird parts to it, like the angels I mentioned before, as well as just randomly having the Dragon Slayer armor boss from Lothric Castle just here for some reason in the swamp. Why it's here, I don't know. The armor just kind of feels out of place here, but it's optional and nowhere near required to progress, but it's still kind of weird. Then we have the actual boss fights, with the first being with the Demon Prince. I love this fight so much. It's so visually stunning, and I love how cinematic it all feels. And I love how depending on which version you beat first, it ends up with different attacks based on its final form. This fight is yet again a great 2-stage fight, and I can't say enough good things about it. It's also awesome to finally see the Demon Prince, knowing this is the same creature Lorien defeated way back when. And when you think about it, by killing the Demon Prince, you technically end all demonkind in this current era, which is crazy. It's such an awesome fight. I love the music. The arena is cool too, because it's covered in like old buildings that you can somewhat use as cover to survive the onslaught. But it's not really a difficult fight. It's just fun as hell and an amazing spectacle. I mean, just look at this. It's so cool. We also have a fight against a human NPC where apparently actual players can inhabit this fight and attack you, making it like the old Monk and Demon Souls, but I just fought the regular version. It's a fine fight. I don't really consider this really to be a boss fight. After all, it's just an NPC invader-like enemy, but it's fine. There really isn't much to say here. It's not amazing or anything, but I guess in terms of human-sized enemies, it at least has various attacks that keep you on your toes. But it's the weakest of the boss fights, if you even want to call it that, from this expansion. Then we get to the beefiest boss in Dark Souls 3 with the only optional boss in this DLC, Dark Eater Midir. You're harassed by this ancient dragon while traversing the land, and you can eventually get into this badass cinematic fight on the bridge where you cut Midir down and it falls into the abyss below. This moment was awesome. I kind of wish more dragons throughout the series actually allowed you to fight them like this instead of always being out of weapon swinging reach, but knocking Midir down and sending his ass spiraling was so satisfying and I felt like I was in a movie. And through some weird level design, you can finally face the dragon, and this boss fight probably killed me as many times as Frida did. Even though Midir hits like a freight train, once you learn his patterns, the fight isn't all that bad. You run to his tail when he stands up, dodge when he swings his tail, and you basically rinse and repeat while also running away while he powers up with darkness until he explodes. He also has this crazy laser breath attack that turns the entire arena into a German disco light show, and he definitely sniped me a couple of times with that attack. The damage on that move is unreal. This is, in my opinion, the best dragon fight in not only Dark Souls, but maybe all of From Software's games apart from maybe Placidus Sax and Elden Ring. Midir is crazy, if a bit predictable. Well, once you've died 10 times and figured him out, he's predictable, I guess, but he's nevertheless a great fight. And again, unsurprisingly, his OST is amazing, and just look at him. This is an eternal dragon who's tasked to literally consume the abyss for eternity to protect a land. What a wicked fight. I love this game. And after all of these fights and traversing the ring city, you'll come to a gorgeous room where a mysterious woman with an egg lays sleeping. This woman is Filianor, the daughter of Gwyn. Can I just say that this room is one of the single most beautiful rooms in the entire game? It's like a painting with how it looks, but once you interact with the egg, it shatters and a bright light consumes the room, transporting you to somewhere else. You then see this once beautiful goddess, now a shriveled up corpse. You then exit her chambers only to find yourself in a sea of sand. It's at this moment I realized this sand dune looked familiar, as it has a striking resemblance to the sand dune the pilgrims in the opening cinematic for Dark Souls 3 look to be traveling through on their way to Lothric as they die one by one. You run into a poor withered man claiming that a red hood is eating him and his friends, that this hood has come for what can only be described as the Dark Soul. And at this point, as I looked at the ruins and the endless sands, I had a feeling like I did when I crossed into that dark dimension where Champion Gundyr was. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did Filianor transport us not only to a different location, but maybe a different time as well? Cause she's young when we found her, and after she transports us, she's now decayed as if she's been dead for a long time. Maybe her true appearance is just an illusion, but I'm inclined to believe that she may have jumped the player into the distant future where literally nothing remains. This is supported by the fact that you can find Shura, a woman who tasks you with helping her friend Midir, yes, that Midir, and she's apparently been looking for you for a long time. But I just met her like an hour or two ago earlier in the Ring City, so she wouldn't say it's been that long, right? Unless, of course, we have traveled forward in time, then it would make sense. Shura attacks you, and she seems to suggest that she's the last of the gods within the world, that she represents the Age of Fire, and that the darkness should fear her due to her bloodline. And once this fight ends, in a way, again I could be wrong, but it seems like we just ended the last god in the world. Sort of how we ended the demons when the Demon Prince died previously. Of course, I could be misinterpreting all of this, but this would mean that we are now at the end of the world where both gods and demons have ceased to exist. That's crazy. But then you make your way to the dunes, leaving Shura as the sounds of ash and sand deafen your thoughts. You make your way down, and there's someone waiting for you. And here you find the same old man who transported us all that time ago to Ariandel, and we see him wearing a red hood just like what was described by that dying royal man. This mysterious person has been devouring what remains of life in order to survive. We also see that this red hood is in what seems to be some sort of court, as if royalty used to sit in these chairs as they passed judgment upon those beneath them. But it's now nothing but ash, and their legacies are long forgotten like the sands gracing their thrones. Those hallowed lords are the Pygmy Lords, beings who could bear the Dark Soul. The Red Hood is revealed to be Slave Knight Gale, and at this moment the only living beings that seem to be left in this world are you and him. A slave knight, according to the lore via the armor set, are undead warriors who were sent to the front lines during wars to tire out the enemy forces until the main military would be sent in. These slave knights were just as their name implies, and they were seen as lesser, slaves to their masters and seen as disposable by the commanders and the armies that forced them into combat. Gale seems to be one of these knights, except unlike his brethren or his masters, Gale still remains. And he's gone as far as to start eating the very masters who sent him into combat to keep himself alive. And buried within Gale's body is none other than the dark soul of man itself. The Dark Soul is one of the Lord's souls and is the origin of humanity as well as the undead. So, it's all led up to this very moment. This fight, the lore, and the music surrounding it is easily in the top 5 for best Soulsborne fights of all time. I would even wager that Gale is just as good as Soul of Cinder. His fight is 2 stages, and yet he doesn't feel overpowered or annoying to fight. He's this perfect balance between spectacle and skill. He definitely feels more balanced than Frieda, I'll tell you that, but Gale's fight is masterful. It's just the Slave Knight and the Ashen One at the end of the world fighting over the future of a land long dead and forgotten. You really have to stay on your toes constantly, and his style of fighting is this almost primal beast-like form, like he's long forgotten his own humanity and has reverted to his naturalistic instincts to survive this apocalypse. And once you beat his first form, Gale bleeds upon his weapon and his true power is revealed, and you now face the might of humanity itself as the Dark Soul powers the Slave Knight in a last attempt to defeat the Ashen One. The music and the vibe of this final fight is incredible. It's like this desperate battle of wills as the ashes of all existence lay at the feet of the last 2 survivors of the world. The way Gale leaps up and slams down while spinning is so cool, and he even has interesting tricks like his crossbow gun, and at times can even call down lightning as if the Dark Soul is distorting the nature surrounding it, allowing Gale to conjure up elemental powers he wouldn't normally have access to. The fight is long and brutal, but you prove capable and are able to overcome the knight, and Gale, a slave who outlived his masters, who became a monster due to the Dark Soul, is finally allowed to rest, and his body disappears into ash only to become one with the endless seas of sand that make up what's left of this dying world. While Gale might be forgotten in the eras to come, he's still one of the best fights From Software has ever made, and it's a fitting epilogue to Dark Souls as a series. You can now deliver the Dark Soul to the Painter Girl, and she can usher in a new world using this power. So, it's not all for naught, but it's incredible to think that you were able to travel to the literal end of the world itself and, in a way, save something from the dying world. The world will end, it's inevitable at this point, but due to your actions, the Ashen One may have just saved humanity after all. Dark Souls 3 is a game about the end of everything. While on the surface it might seem nihilistic and borderline depressing, I would suggest that you shouldn't look at it like that, but instead view its story as being the inevitable end of life and learning to accept that no matter how great or lively things may seem, that one day, regardless of your birth or choices, it will come to an end one day. And within death there lies the insurmountable abyss of the unknown, an existence where there is no existence, no thought or being, that all life will one day inevitably return to, and that within that dark lies a soul, the possibility of new life that might grow one day into something more beautiful and grand than anything that's come before. And it's with that realization comes acceptance that all good things must come to an end one day, which is what Dark Souls 3 is about at its core. By accepting the end of not only the series, you can move on to newer experiences, just like how From Software can move on to new stories to tell in the future as well. Nothing lasts forever, and throughout Dark Souls 3's story, we witness the graves of kingdoms, the final death throes of civilization desperately seeking salvation, and how the end of everything can turn even victims into monstrous survivors. If this truly is the end of Dark Souls as a series, in my opinion, From Software and Miyazaki couldn't have done it better. The game is full of amazing boss fights, moments, and features some truly profound philosophical ideas that are mostly told without anyone saying much but a few words. It's a game full of wonderful level design, fast-paced but fair combat, and some beautiful sights to behold. It pays tribute to previous games tastefully and even lets us return to places we never thought we'd return to. But in the end, Dark Souls 3 is exactly what it needed to be, and that was the end. The finale to a series that created not only one of the most beloved subgenres of games to this day, but birthed a passionate community of creators and fans alike, working together to piece the mythology of a world built by a team of passionate developers for fans of dark fantasy. And while the fire fades, maybe one day we'll return to the world of Dark Souls. And although it won't be the kingdoms of Lordran, Drangleic, or Lothric, I do confidently believe that one day we will return and fight back the Abyss once more. Because, like the dark side of humanity, the world of Dark Souls is like a circle, a cycle of life and death. And one day we'll return, like ash chasing embers. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video essay about Dark Souls 3 as I talked about what I loved even more, and some nitpicks I had with it as well. What were some of your favorite moments in Dark Souls 3? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, if you did enjoy the video, that I have much more content already on my channel, and subscribe for more in the future. I have at least one more big essay-like video for this year, so I hope you look forward to it. Thanks to my patrons, as always, for their undying support. You can support my channel on Patreon or even donate via Super Thanks as well if you'd like to. I'm Endymion, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and remember, don't go hollow.